Welcome to Healing Minds, a place where you explore your inner world and learn healing practices to a better mental well-being. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a video. Hi everyone, welcome to Healing Minds. I am Tania. This is a place where you learn about topics regarding mental health and healing. Mental health is a daily practice. And this is specifically geared towards empaths or HSPs, which mean highly sensitive people. But of course, it can be beneficial to anyone because anger is experienced during healing from trauma. Anger is a natural reaction during trauma recovery. It is a feeling that has been justified by something that has been unpleasant, unfair, and horrible that has happened in your life. And the feelings alongside anger is during this time, you get the impression that you have little power and control and realize that terrible things can happen to good people. The problem with it is if it's not managed well, it can be harmful and aggravate, make your depression or anxiety worse, which sabotages the healing process because you begin to think adversely and your body responds poorly. And another reaction is you feel like you're out of control. So there's a lot that happens in the body during the anger response, even though, again, it's normal and natural. So don't feel bad if you do get those little anger feelings during healing. Two types of anger I'm going to talk about is number one is anger over what has happened to you. And that involves a lot of stress and upheaval in your life. It's impossible to rationalize why horrible things happen. So there is that little emotion of anger that shows up. Number two is anger as a consequence of triggers or circumstances and people in your environment that drive you to recall the trauma. I've spoken about triggers before, but it's important to understand triggers will occur during trauma healing. Triggers are your teachers. And there's a connection that only you can see, even though people around you don't get you or don't understand you. This is personalized. So how do you handle anger when it disrupts your life? In this video, I'm going to show you how to discover the source of your anger and how to use it to your advantage instead of to your harm. Again, I know I sound repetitive. It's okay to express anger. It's a natural emotion. But if your anger is making you feel out of control and unsafe, it is choosing the healthier ways to cope. And so your healing, because trauma takes a lot of healing, is not hindered from. The first type of anger, this anger is repetitive anger. It's directed at the same situation and person. It reoccurs over and over. It will go on indefinitely until you are able to look at the source of the anger, understand why you are angry, and learn how to accept the situation and person who has caused it. This may lead to forgiveness when the anger directed at the person or situation is understandable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to lead to forgiveness of the situation and person because of the event was atrocious. It was horrible. So forgiveness is a very personal, and all these things you hear about forgiveness, it's not necessarily true because you can't forgive certain people or events. However, you can forgive yourself by taking too long and holding on to the anger, which impacts your mental health. This kind of anger is like statements that start with, how could she, how could he, why did this? That's incredible that this can, he or she was so harsh or cruel. What exactly did I do possibly to deserve this? I am hurt that he or she was so mean or cruel. What did I do? Those are just several examples of what statements that can start with triggering the anger response. And also, this type of anger involves something inside of you that you need to be heard. You need to share it with the people that are involved in the situation and or share it with a therapist. So it is important, if it is someone that you engage with on a regular basis, to communicate this anger issue with them, if possible, because some people are not receptive to open communication. Otherwise, it will not get better. Let's focus on those by determining storylines. These are the stories that you create in your mind. They can be true or false, but it is still what is going on in your mind. So I'm just going to use an example. For example, someone is treating you unfairly and you are taking it personally. This keeps showing up and it's causing anger, as well as what triggers other feelings, because anger can lead to other feelings. It's like a trigger to other feelings, such as frustration or hopelessness. So first thing you want to do, you want to challenge yourself and your thinking. So challenge that specific concern that's making you angry. So for example, I shared an example. So this is what I would ask myself. Ask yourself two questions. One, do I let this go? Or two, do I act assertively? I'll later on have a special video on assertive techniques, especially for empaths and HSPs who have more of a challenge using assertive skills, because they tend to be sometimes people pleasers or want everybody to be kind or want to keep the peace with everyone. But no, obviously, in order to keep the peace with everyone, you have to be able to manage anger in situations or with people. To continue, using your self-talk and logic, it might sound like something like this, using the example I gave you. Is the person's character like this towards other people, or is it just me that I'm taking it personally? Because sometimes it's the person's character, they're like that with other people and not necessarily just targeting you. So if you discover, you get evidence that, hey, this is the person's character, they're just rotten towards a lot of people, or they mistreat many people, so it's not just geared towards me. So that's irrational. You rationalize it. You consider that certain people are self-centered, they can be narcissistic or indifferent to how they treat others. They really don't care. So then you have to let it go, the two choices I gave you, because especially if they're no longer in your life, if they're gone, and you're like, they're gone. I don't have to worry about them anywhere. So they're no longer a threat, and you can set yourself free. But other situation, if you are a target and you figure that out, hopefully in an honest way, because sometimes we can deceive ourselves into thinking something that it actually is not, you have to devise ways to protect yourself, whether that is in avoiding the individual if you can, detach, you want less communication if possible, or you want to confront the matter in some way. Of course, if you're in a risky situation, you have to find ways to get out of it and completely avoid contact with people that are hurting your mental and physical health, that's seeking professional help. Otherwise, this is the situation where you must be assertive, which may be unpleasant, but it is vital because you are already in your vulnerable state of healing and you cannot afford to worsen your situation because healing takes a lot of patience, time, and strength. So ask yourself, do you need to speak to someone? Such as, for instance, your boss at work or a neighbor or a friend or a family member? Do you need to address to them because possibly they're totally unaware of the problems they're causing? Or okay, so this is about if you can't ignore them, you just can't ignore them. It's just like right there in close proximity that they're doing something that's just not good for you. And this is when you need to confront them politely. You bring the matter up in a polite manner, and hopefully they're receptive to it. But unfortunately, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Again, going back to not all people are responsive to lousy behavior or accepting or kind to what you have to say. That's just the facts of human behavior. Not all people are empathetic, even if you are. So this is another important point I want to bring up is a lot of the stress of mental health can be saved if you recognize and accept that not everyone is caring, because most empaths and HSPs are. You have to recognize not all people are going to be like that, are conscientious, or concerned. So that 3 C's: recognize and accept not all people are caring, conscientious, or concerned in your well-being is a valuable lesson in anger management. I don't care if it's a friend, a relative, a coworker, a stranger, a neighbor. Not all of those people are going to care at all what you're going through, or if they're bothering you or doing anything that's impacting your personal space, therefore your mental health. So that's important. So that's why avoidance, if at all possible, is essential. This entails banning all contact, especially if you're aware of specific persons that possibly they want to bring up. This is another example of topics that provoke anger in you. It could be politics, religion, anything talking about a specific person. Then like, okay, I just really need to keep my distance from this person because I do not wish to participate in the conversations that they have. Okay, now number 2, the second kind of anger is this type of anger can show up anytime and anywhere due to triggers. Trauma healing involves triggers. So in the context of mental health, a trigger is anything that has an impact on your emotional state, and it's frequently by generating intense and overwhelming distress. A trigger impairs your capacity to stay in the present moment, and it may cause certain mental patterns to emerge or impact your actions. So these triggers can be obviously related to a traumatic experience or something bad that happened to you. And once that happens, it can put you in a state of flight or fight, or what do I do? Do I need to protect myself? And the physical responses, rapid heartbeat, sweating, and so forth. Again, it can happen anytime or any day. And it can be anything a person says, or it can be their actions. It can be a sound, a scent, or an image. If you have had triggers, you understand because you've been through it. So during your trauma healing what it is and what it feels like and the impact it has had on you. So the situation reminds you of something bad that has occurred in your life. And it usually tends to be because your boundaries have been breached. You feel like insulted, you feel hurt, mistreated in some way because, again, you're in a very vulnerable or sensitive state. So this is how anger works in response to a trigger. You begin to generate anger, mental processes through images and memories. Then, as a result of the emotion, other responses are fueled. Anger fuels depression and anxiety. Those are just a couple of reactions. I'm sure it fuels other emotions also. But since with trauma healing, there's a lot of feelings of more anxiety, and depression intensifies. That's why anger can strengthen those. So you have to recognize that also. And also the body responses. As I talked about earlier, you can sweat, rapid heartbeat, your body tightens, tense muscles, you can get aching, and it can lead to other chronic physical problems, as like a chronic shoulder pain, neck pain, or anything. So by having this anger response, you might believe that a rapid reaction will help you blow off some steam because you feel like you're no longer in control of your anger. And this is the result of feeling like there is a threat. It's always about a threat. Even if there isn't a threat, you still think that there is, that you have to defend yourself, you have to defend your space, or including your things. So it's really a protective mechanism, even if it's just a perceived threat. So when you are healing from trauma, you become more sensitive, and at times you're hypervigilant. It is simple to mix up a perceived threat with an actual threat. And this also implies to things, people, or events that may have not affected you previous to the trauma, and you have been able to dismiss it easily, but now they're magnified. How can you manage anger triggers during healing? Keep in mind that this is about recovering from trauma, which naturally causes triggers. This would not concern you if you're not recuperating from trauma, or if the degree of it was less severe, but it is now more acute. You are more perceptive and aware of what is going on around you. So when these triggers occur, obviously it's going to be afterwards. I want you to think about, what was the event that caused this trigger, and why did it set off this trigger? What was the firing thought that let it come out from within me? What were my bodily and emotional reactions? And how can I approach this circumstance logically or in a way that does not damage me? So I've already been through it, and I need to kind of reflect on what it was. And that source, it's something that I need to go deep within to figure out and to work on it, because triggers, I always say, are your teachers. Triggers are your teachers. So when you answer these questions to help you deal with similar triggers in the future, and you will be able to become more effective in handling any of these triggers that happen, because along your healing journey, you're hoping on working on your mental strength. So triggers often deal with other people. Some people just don't understand boundaries. Again, it has to do with boundaries as well as respect for others. So you may have to use your assertive skills again and speak about your desire to not, for instance, be constantly distracted when you have many responsibilities, or you have so much going on in your life and you can't commit to anything else. That's one example. Or if you know that they knowingly do things to annoy you, again, that's setting the boundaries if avoidance is not possible. Also, if you are an empath or HSP, you are probably aware that others take advantage of the qualities that you have, and you must draw the line as to what you can tolerate, even if it is not terrible conduct, but still somebody is imposing on your boundaries, because then they will take advantage of it, and whatever it is. And as I said, as HSPs, you know that, whether it's your time, kindness, or or anything for that matter. So consider how your anger affects the remainder of the day. That's another important point, is when you experience anger, it totally impacts your day. Is gone, it's done. So and obviously it worsens your anxiety and depression. And think about, do you discard your intentions? Sometimes you wake up with good intentions for the day, or you responsibilities, but you completely abandon them because there's a trigger during the day or there's an anger response. So it ruins the remainder of your day and pulls you away from everything good that you are attempting to do or improve in your life. Another important question to ask yourself is this anger justifiable, or am I fabricating a tale to justify why I'm angry? Remember, sometimes we make up the stories just to kind of get ourselves angered, and there's really no justifiable reason for it. So we have to make sure that we're aware of that. So as you progress in your healing journey, you will be able to regulate your anger better by identifying it and refusing to allow certain events to upset you. And you'll be more adept at avoiding particular individuals or situations that will make your mental health worse than it is. You'll be better at that. Also, you'll become more selective when it comes to people, circumstances, topics, and you avoid becoming involved of anything that will trigger your anger response. So, for example, have you ever heard of a family member or friend talk about someone from your past who isn't a decent person, and you just do not like to talk about them or do not like to talk about a certain person? And each time you have to tell them that, I'm sorry, you can't communicate with them if this continues. So it's certain topics that you might not want to discuss. So that's just like one example. So those two responses to anger, I want you to think about the benefits to you if you respond to anger as letting it go or taking assertive action. It will not increase your suffering, and you will have control of your mental health. Other quick tips to control these two types of anger is to look for your distractors. Distractors are activities that you do to take away from those anger thoughts or remove yourself from anger-provoking situations. You have to have those and ready to go to help with your healing process. Number one, I'm just going to share with you a few, and this should prompt you to think of your own, or you can use some of these ideas from the list. Number one can be going out for a walk outdoors in nature. Two can be reading your favorite book while you're listening to some relaxing music. Three can be doing a few power movements, wakening the body because the body gets tight. And four can be splashing cold water on your face and let yourself know that this anger will be temporary and you can return to a safe state. 5, you can sit in a quiet place and do nothing, but just take deep breaths to regulate, to calm your nervous system. 6, I talked about this one, but again, avoid those people, situations, or even social media pages that you know will make you angry or feel worse. 7, be certain to discuss anger resulting from trauma with a therapist so you can be open and you can get the support that you need, because it's good to see or to listen to a different perspective. As your mind definitely during this time can be clouded. There's a lot of anxiety, depression, so much going on. You need somebody else to give you a different point of view to awaken your mind. So definitely, please seek the therapist for your individual situation and find a therapist that specializes in that. So I want to conclude the video with saying is when you develop greater self-awareness during healing, you gain more self-control and you become more proactive in your mental health. Have compassion with yourself since there is no such thing as perfection. No perfection here. And if you have your terrible days, it is all right. It does not mean you're at fault. It simply means you need to review your anger and the most effective approach to control it. Healing is tough work, so give yourself plenty of time and patience with yourself. And I want you to share here in the comments of how, during your trauma healing, do you control anger, and what do you do as your distractors to help yourself in those harder days that will show up while you're going through healing. Thank you so much for listening to Healing Minds, and please subscribe to my channel. It's all about mental health, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.